Greetings. This video, we are back again. We are still looking at a new topic, which is employment communication. Even in this video, we are going to start looking at some part of employment communication, because we said it shall mainly focus on two things: uh, employment letters and then the interview process. So in this video, we're going to look at an introduction to the interview process. So that's what we're going to look at, and we shall handle the interview process and everything that you would need to know on this process, such that by the time you're faced with an interview, or you're going for an interview, you have a glimpse of how you can handle it in order to come up with a successful interview and even to win the job. So if you've not yet subscribed to my channel, it will be better you subscribe, such that you get this content and notified when it is posted. That is, if you enable the bell icon. Anyway, let's get started. So the interview process serves a twofold purpose of helping an employer determining whether you're qualified, like you as the employee or the job seeker, that you're qualified for that job you're interviewing for. And it also helps you to decide. So it does not only help the employer, but it also helps you as the job seeker to decide whether your values and goals align with those of the employer. So that is what I was talking about in the previous video. Do not go to the interview only to be for the employer to gain by determining whether you're qualified. As the employer determines that you're qualified, you also decide whether this employer has values and goals that align with that. You also check to see that your values and goals align with those of the employer, because someone may go to an employer when you would like to work with a company that is ready to provide an insurance, like when you want to work in a company where they provide wellness programs, or maybe insurance as one of them, you get, and many other things that you value you as a person, those others that are part of your values and goals. So you also decide on that. So the only way you can find out is by preparing questions that can help you evaluate to see whether this employer is the right person you'd like to work for. So that is the way the interview process helps us. Sometimes people just think that interview is just help the employer to know whether you're the right person to work for them. No, it also helps you to know whether the employer is the right person to work for. So in that case, you're also supposed to ask questions. So this process can vary depending on the company and role. So with some companies will require several face-to-face interviews, while others can make a decision after one meeting. So that's why you find that many companies have more than one interview and others have only one face-to-face interview. So in this video, we're going to look at the steps of the interview process, and we shall also look at the tips for doing well in an interview. Otherwise, what is a job interview? So by definition, a job interview is a meeting between a job candidate and an interviewer, or the employee, who is typically a manager or human resource personnel, and another representative of the employer, or the employer himself. So something like that. So it is a meeting between the job candidate and the interviewer, who may be a manager, human resource personnel, or any other representative of the employer or the employer himself. So this meeting is held to help assess whether the applicant is the right person for the role. So the employer uses a job interview to find out what you can do for the company in terms of your qualifications and potential contributions you can provide. So an interview also allows you to determine whether it is an environment in which you can thrive and you want to enter. Just like I told you, it is two-way, helping the employer and the employee. You get. So interviews can be conducted in person, over the phone, via email or video conferencing applications, and it's common to attend 2 to 3 rounds of interviews before a final hiring decision is made. So now let's look at the steps of the interview process. So the interview process or the interview processes can vary depending on the company's practices and protocol, but most interviews generally follow the same format, like consisting of the steps we're going to look at. So these steps could be 5, whereby you have screening, we have the first interview, we have the second interview, we have the third interview, and then the fifth step is the decision step. So we're going to look at each of them briefly. So first of all, the screening. So the screening is like the screening is just like any other interviews. It is also an interview, just like it is used to come up like many employers conduct a preliminary interview to determine whether you as the candidate are viable for the job. Like the screening can be conducted over the phone or in person, and it typically lasts between 15 to 20 minutes and more depending on the company policy. It's not fixed to those minutes. So this conversation, or the main purpose of the screening interview, is to curate the list of candidates, or to determine the list of candidates that will be called for the official first interview. So that is the difference. The screening is an interview to determine candidates that will be called for the official first interview, but otherwise the screening interviews just like any other interviews. And if you're preparing for it, you also prepare for it just like you would prepare for an official first interview. So the second one is the first interview. So typically the first interview is the first face-to-face meeting with your potential employer. So their goal is to get to know you and assess your skills and experience in relation to their needs for this particular role. So they are also looking to get to know you to determine if you will fit in the company's culture. And the first interview may contain the following things. Let us look at what the first interview usually contains. So first, it contains an introduction. So here, the first few minutes, like you've come for the interview, so the first few minutes consist of meeting the interviewer and getting settled into the interview space, maybe office or any other space that is selected by the interviewer. So this is also their first impression of you. Take note, this is their first impression of you. So it is important to make it a positive one by using good posture. Use a good sitting posture. You should sit properly. You sit straight, your head up. You get. So you should have a good sitting posture. Then eye contact. You maintain eye contact with the interviewer, and then a firm handshake. In case you have a handshake with them, you should make a firm handshake like a man or like a lady, not a shy handshake. When you get, should be a firm handshake. And then the other thing is the interviewer generally takes the first several minutes of the interview to tell you about their organization or their company. So normally that is the introduction. What you have to be keen about is good posture, eye contact, and firm handshake to make a good impression. The first good impression, it is very important. We shall also look at maybe how to make a first impression when you're going for an interview. We shall look at it maybe in the later time. Then the other part of the first interview is the interview questions. So the main part of the interview consists of the employer asking you questions and listening to your responses. So sometimes taking notes for later reference. So they ask you, as sometimes they may take notes for later reference. and most times this part lasts around 20 minutes. So they will ask you questions as they take notes, and then the other part is your questions. So you've seen the introduction, the interview questions, and then your questions. So the interviewer having finished asking you his or her questions, determining whether you're fit to work with them, then it is your part also to ask questions. This is when you find out whether the employer is fit for you to work with, whether they will provide an environment you would wish to work in. You get? So when the interviewer invites you to ask questions, you have the opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge, expertise, and the extent of research you've done on this company. Because usually before you go for an interview, you're supposed to make research about the interview and maybe the person who will interview you, if you know them, if you get to know who it will be, like which is the human resource, the manager, something like that. So as we shall look at it in the future time when looking at how to prepare for an interview. So you need to arrive prepared with at least 3 to 5 or to 10 thoughtful questions. You can come up with any number of questions that you think they will help you to know whether this is the right employer you'd like to work with. So as during the interview, you may find that some of these questions will be answered by the interviewer, maybe as they give the introduction about the company. So that is why it is very important to have a good number of questions, because if all your questions are answered during the interview and it comes to your time to ask questions and not have even one, then does not give a good impression. The other person who has enough and asks will be better than you get. So take note of that. And then so you adjust. If some of the questions are answered during the presentation, again, don't ask them when it comes your turn. Just ask those which the interview has not answered. And there are certain questions you shouldn't ask. Questions concerning the salary, you don't ask them immediately in the first interview, or that is the part of the interviewer to tell you about that, but not to ask about it. Then the other one is the concluding interview. That is concluding the interview. So that is the last part of the first interview. So as the interviewer ends, they will likely, they will most sometimes walk you out. So it is a good idea to ask all your questions before you rise from your seat. Like before you rise from your seat to leave, you should make sure you have asked all your questions. So as you leave, you can restate your interest in the position with enthusiasm and make sure to thank them sincerely for the meeting and offer a firm handshake and maintain eye contact. So as you quit the interview, you restate your interest in the job. So you can be like, okay, thank you for your time, thank you for coming, and be like, thank you too, I'm interested in the job, thank you for the time, it's time. Okay, so you restate your interest in the job with enthusiasm. Like you can be like, okay, thank you, Mr. Jeremiah, and be like, thank you too, I'm actually interested in the job, it is a good fit for me, thank you for your time. Then you quit. So you get a better way of restating your interest in the job. Then now we're going to the second interview. So that is the first screening is done, and then first interview is done. So then we go to the second interview. So if you've succeeded in impressing them in the first interview, then you may be asked to return for a second meeting. So this meeting typically allows you to meet the different department heads and sometimes tour the facility. So the interviewer will ask at this point deeper, more specific questions to follow up on certain topics from the first interview and attempt to get a better idea of how you would acclimate to the work environment. Then the third interview. So now in the third interview, if at all you make it to the third interview, some employers prefer to conduct a third interview to help them make a final decision. So this will vary. Like I told you in the beginning, some companies have a number of interviews, whereas some companies only have one when it is enough for them to make a decision, but others will need more interviews to come up with a decision. So For this session, you should have gained some in-depth knowledge about the company and how it runs day to day, and maybe have an idea of how you would fit into the existing workplace culture. So you may have the opportunity maybe to meet potential co-workers during the third interview. Then the last step is the decision. So this is the final step in the interview process. So if the company wants to hire you, they will usually, maybe they will give the job offer upon your background check and references, and then the offer will usually come in form of a typed letter, but in some cases you'll receive the offer in an email, or most employers offer a verbal offer before they present the hard copy, or the hard copy, to make sure you are happy with the terms, or allow you the chance to negotiate before signing in on. So those are the steps of the interview process. Probably I think for this video we can stop it here, and we shall continue. We shall look at the tips. Like I said, we were supposed to look at the tips, but it seems like time is not on our side. I want if I at all I wish to look at them in this video, it may go up to 30 to 20 some 28 minutes. So let me leave it here, and then the tips for performing your best in an interview, we shall look at them in the next video. Otherwise, thank you for watching. You can like and subscribe for more content. God bless you.